Mrs. Grant, based on what you said is important to you and what we've discussed today about your heart disease, let's discuss options that best meet the goals that you've shared with me today. You've told me that you want to be as independent as long as possible, to avoid long hospitalizations, and to retain your mental and physical abilities. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Anything else?
Not right now.
All right, thank you. We'll keep these in mind as we discuss a specific decision today, that is cardiopulmonary resuscitation, and whether you would want it to be tried if your heart and your breathing were to suddenly stop. I have some questions that may help us think about deciding about CPR. Tell me what you understand about CPR.
Well, I took a class at the community center, so I know that it involves chest pressure and breathing, and it's a way to start the heart again.
That's right. Tell me what you understand about the benefits and the burdens of CPR.
I'm not sure about those, but CPR does help some people stay alive, right?
Yes, it does help some people stay alive. Would you like to learn more about the success of CPR?
Yes, I would.
Okay. This booklet is about CPR's benefits and burdens. You may take it home after this appointment and share it with your husband or whomever else you like.
Okay, great.
We'll talk about what CPR is, when it works the best, and people it might not work as well for. CPR is done for you by someone else. It can include breathing into your mouth and pressing on your chest, electrical shock and drugs to help start your heart, and a tube to help you breathe. CPR does not help as much as most of us think. It works best if you're healthy with no illness, and if it can be given to you within a few minutes of when your heart or your lungs stop. CPR does not work as well if you have a chronic health problem, if you have an illness that can no longer be treated, or if you're older and weak. If you're in the hospital and you receive CPR, you have a 22% chance of it working and leaving the hospital alive. Can you now tell me what you understand about the success of CPR?
Well, the success rate is lower than I thought it would be, and it's clearly not as good for people who have heart disease like I do. But I could still be one of those 22 people out of 100 that it works for, right?
You could, but I have to be honest as your physician, knowing what I know about your heart disease, the likelihood of you surviving CPR is probably even lower than the 22% because your disease has recently gotten worse, as we've discussed.
I guess that makes sense. My chances wouldn't be as good as someone who is healthy.
CPR also has side effects and what we call complications that I want you to understand, especially since you've told me you want to avoid long hospitalizations and you want to remain as independent as possible. If CPR does help to get your heart and your lungs to work, it usually has side effects. Your lungs are weakened and you may need to be on a breathing machine for a time. You'll need to be cared for in an ICU. You may have brain damage, and you may have damage to your ribs. Can you tell me what you understand about the side effects or the complications of CPR?
Well, I'd probably end up in a hospital on a breathing machine, and I didn't know about the brain damage, but that doesn't sound very good either. What happens if I don't at least try CPR?
Well, you would die, but we would of course keep you as comfortable as possible.
Well, if my heart stopped for any reason, could I at least try CPR to see if it would work?
That is a great question. Once we start CPR, we can't put limits on it. We must continue according to best medical practice or unless it's clear that it's not going to work.
I'm just not sure what I should do.
Well, let's talk more about this. What goals do you have for CPR?
Well, I'd want it to work.
What does want it to work mean to you?
Well, I'd want to be who I am today, the same way. I wouldn't want to be any worse. I can live this way, but I don't want to have, more problems like the ones you talked about, like brain damage and weakened lungs.
Any other goals you would have for CPR?
I want to stay in my own home, and I don't want to be a burden on my family.
What does being a burden mean to you?
Well, I don't want them to have to take care of me. I live independently with a little help from them now, and I like it that way. I also don't want to spend all my money and force them to support me because I've spent all my money on, extra health care that I might have just avoided.
These goals are consistent with what we've talked about so far today. If you don't mind a few more questions, we're very close to helping you decide about whether or not you would want CPR. What would be an unacceptable result of CPR?
I do not want to be a vegetable, and I don't want to be on breathing machines for a long time in a hospital bed.
Vegetable is a word we hear often from patients. Can you tell me more about what that means to you?
It means not knowing who you are, not knowing anybody around you, not being able to communicate, just being disconnected from life. I would just hate that.
Thank you for sharing what's important to you. I know this hasn't been an easy conversation, but it's really helped me to understand your goals and your values better. Based on what I've heard today and what I know about you, may I share with you my opinion about CPR?
Yes, please do.
You've told me that you want to be able to stay as independent as long as possible, avoid long hospitalizations, and retain your mental and physical abilities as they are now. I don't think CPR is likely to help you achieve those goals. For example, if your heart and your lungs were to stop and you were to receive CPR, it's likely that you would be in the hospital for a long period of time, and it's unlikely that your mental and physical abilities would recover to the place that they are now. For these reasons, I would not recommend that CPR be attempted, but of course the decision is yours. Can you tell me what you understand about my recommendation?
Well, thanks for being honest. It really sounds as though CPR is not going to help me live the life I want to live much longer, so it's not going to make sense for me. But how can I prevent someone from trying to do CPR for me, even if I don't want it? I live by myself, and a crisis could happen in the middle of the night and someone would call 911 and suddenly I have police and firemen and they make decisions and move fast. I wouldn't want them to start something that isn't going to have the kind of result that we've talked about today. So is there anything I can do to warn them away or say, please don't start something that's not going to help me?
That's a very good question, Mrs. Grant. Here in Wisconsin, we have two systems in place. The first is called a POLST form. It's a medical order that as your physician I would sign. It includes things like CPR and other emergency care that you may or may not want in the event of an emergency like those you just spoke about. There's also a Do Not Resuscitate wristband that's honored throughout our state. Would you like to know more information about these choices? I'm happy to refer you to an ACP facilitator if you like.
Yes, please do that.